Hi everybody, my name is Rob Olson, and before I jump into my passion, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself to kind of lead into things. I played tennis here at Rider University as an undergrad. I was a 4-year starter, I was a captain my senior year, and obviously my passion is tennis, but tonight I'm going to be discussing the decline in American men's tennis. And so I decided to go back into the past, and this is a picture of a young Andy Roddick raising his first Grand Slam trophy. And so everybody was hyping him up. He's the next big thing. We flash forward to about the summer of 2012, and he's waving goodbye. He's crying. People are upset, including me, because basically I grew up watching him while I was playing tennis myself. So it was kind of like it was the end of an era. And so he's waving goodbye. He's the last American hope, and he raises the interesting question: who's going to step up, and is American tennis going to further decline, or is it going to be revived? And so this is a picture of Roland Garros and the red clay, the famous red clay that is the biggest villain of American tennis players. They call it American kryptonite, because nobody has reached past the round of 16 since 2003. It was Andre Agassi. And a couple of times, Andy Roddick would withdraw from the tournament because of injury, but who knows if it was injury or if he just didn't, he was scared, whatever. We're not going to jump into that. But basically, there's 3 reasons that there's been a decline in American men's tennis. First of all, it's fundamentals, which just the basics, being a young junior, developing your skills. Second reason is the organization. In the United States, you have the USTA, which is a nonprofit, which I'm going to talk about later on. And the third reason is the Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal factor. Since 2003, they have combined for 28 Grand Slam victories, which is unbelievable. And those two will probably go down as the best of all time. So I don't feel too bad for Roddick, because he's up there. He won't be known as the best of all time, but he competed with the best. So the evolution of tennis. Court surfaces. Currently, the 3 main are clay, grass, and hard. And as I mentioned before, clay is not the favorite of Americans, but Europeans basically grow up on the stuff since they're from a young age. And most Americans in college, when I played in college, I never played on a clay court. There's no clay court tournaments. It was always hard court. Even practicing, very rare in the state of New Jersey did I play when I was in high school playing in tournaments. I played on clay maybe 2 or 3 times in my life. Never played on grass. But grass it's a little faster. It's not as fast as the hard court though. And fundamentals, basically it's just how you teach a junior growing up from basically the age they can hold a racket to they want to play competitively in their adult life. Power versus skill. So back in the day, in the 70s, 80s, and even 90s, power would you could win with speed and power. You could get by with that. And for a while, Andy Roddick, that's what he did. He had a big serve. He set records for fastest serve. But after a while, people began to figure him out, and they'd be able to return to serve. And then after that, he slumped. And then he switched coaches, and he had to alter his game. So a big thing is strategy. Strategy is kind of the key, and psychology, which is becoming a more physical game, but you also have to be mentally tough. And then athletes, like I said, you have to be fast, you got to be strong, you got endurance. Some of these matches can last over 5 hours. So being an athlete is a big key. And this is just a big logo of the USTA, which stands for United States Tennis Association. And on top of that, a lot of people are criticizing the USTA for being a big culprit and why aren't you developing any players? And it's kind of unfair, but I took a quote from this guy, Chris Davies, from an article from the New Haven Register. It's a Connecticut newspaper. And basically he says, they don't make the players make themselves. And to a degree, I agree with him, because you got to have the hunger and the intestinal fortitude to keep going. You can learn all the skills in the world, but you got to have that X factor. So now I'm going to talk about the United States Tennis Association for a little bit. It was established in 1881. It's the largest tennis organization in the entire world. And believe it or not, Arthur Ashe Stadium, which is the Grand Slam site for the US Open in New York, it's the largest tennis facility in the world as well. So there's really no excuse here. We should be, and for a while Americans were on top of the world, the tennis world, but things are changing. It's non-profit, which is very key. It's a very large organization, but it gets no support from the government. It's all private. And one thing that I interviewed a USDA high-performance coach. He's been teaching for 30 years, and he also taught me to play tennis. So I was able to, talk to him a little bit about, is the USDA going in the right direction with things? And this Quick Start tennis program was launched in 2008, and it was long overdue. And basically it's for little kids, like 10 years and younger. And basically they scale down the game. They make the court smaller rackets. They have these little plush balls that are, they look like a tennis ball, but they're a little softer, and they don't bounce as high, so you don't, see the kid on the court. He's trying to hit the ball, and the return comes, and it bounces over his head. Like, you don't see any of that anymore. And it's just very long overdue, and if you can scale it down for kids at such a young age, it'll transfer into the later years and be very helpful. And the man I interviewed, Dave Oken, he basically, you could sum up the interview in a phrase: the world is caught up. That's just what it is. It's not just the US and the world. It's a truly global sport. Besides soccer, it's right up there. And the one big difference is they have nationalized tennis programs, which means it's government funded. And it's not nonprofit. They get unlimited funding. You have the government there to, because the government, like USA, during the Olympics, for example, we want to see our teams do well, right? And so if we had our government behind tennis, I think we'd have more funding. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to lead to like more superstars, but just to have that funding there, just in case, would be really nice and could just be really great. And basically the world is more prosperous. More people will have more money. And tennis is not a cheap sport. It costs money. So, and then the Davis Cup. Basically the last time the USA was somewhat competitive, and they won it in 2007. That was the last time, with Andy Roddick, James Blake, and the Bryan brothers. But since then, they've struggled. And the one thing about Davis Cup that's very interesting is the home team or the higher seed, they get to pick the court surface. So a team like Spain, who's been doing very well, they go, oh, we're playing the USA? Well, okay, we're going to play on clay. So it just, you go in there, and it's already like big disadvantage. Okay, and the third and final factor in the decline of American men's tennis is the Federer-Nadal factor. And as I mentioned before, they probably are the two greatest players of all time. Roger Federer, 17-time Grand Slam champion. He's beaten Roddick 4 times at Wimbledon. So Roddick he's been up there, he's been very competitive, but he can never get over the hump. And most recently in 2009, he lost in 5 sets, and they went on a marathon tiebreaker match. Everybody's rooting for Roddick. Oh, he's finally going to do it, and then he kind of crashed and burned, and it's a shame. But both these two guys are very great for the sport. They're great ambassadors to their countries. And as we see now in the top 60, there's already 6 or 7 Spaniards in the top 60. So they're like the one country to look for. Like, they're really developing their young players. And then I know we have some international people in our class. So I wanted to at least inform you guys. Tomas Berdych, he's from the Czech Republic, and he's currently number 6 in the world. And then there's Geoffrey Sanga. He's from France. He's number 7. And they are both higher than the top American right now. Because they just had their ATP, which is like the big tennis league. Basically, they just had their end of the year stuff. Like the US Open was the final Grand Slam in early September. So, and here are the current Americans. John Isner. He just cracked into the top 10, but he's very inconsistent. He's 6'9", very tall guy, powerful serve, but when people are able to return it, they just run him around. He plays a lot. He actually played the longest match in Wimbledon history, well over 5 hours. They stretched it over 2 days. It was incredible, but he felt for the guy because he just looked physically exhausted. And he's no longer a young gun anymore. He's 27 now, so people are starting to wonder, is he plateaued? Is this the highest he's going to get? And then there's Marty Fish, who actually during the year, he was, before last year, because he had some kind of heart procedure this year. So he came back for the US Open, but he missed a bunch of the other Grand Slams. And he's 30 years old, so he's past his prime, but he's still like a serviceable journeyman player. So now everybody can kind of see that the future is very, bleak right now. But there are a couple of young players. There's one guy, Ryan Harrison, he's 19 years old. He had a couple of wins in the US Open, but he's still far away from being a top competitor. And I'm going to end this with a nice quote I found from John McEnroe, a native from New York. Basically, he was a guy, he was a hothead on the court, real loud mouth. He's a commentator now on NBC during the Grand Slam, so if you tune into the French Open, the US Open, you'll be hearing him going off about something. And what he said is, what is the single most important quality in a tennis champion? I would have to say desire. Staying in there and winning matches when you're not playing that well. And I can relate to that, because there are some matches when you lose the first set, 6-1, 6-2, 6-1, you're like, oh man, it's going to be a long day, let's just pack it in. But there's something inside of me that said, keep fighting, make them work for it. And that desire, that X factor, you can teach a kid all the skills. You can provide them all the top equipment, all the competition in the world, but you still have to have that desire to be successful. And hopefully the juniors, American juniors, they get to learn the fundamentals, and they also have the desire. And here are my references, and thank you for your time.